values that are high, meaning whites, light grays, are values that you can they're called no man's land. I call them no man's land. You should never use them for painting faces or material because nothing can get that white. It's a stylistic choice when you make it, and it's a very dangerous choice to make. Especially if you're painting a human face, you always want to use it very, very carefully. But when we're talking about light sources, the light source itself being in the image, the value has to be um, high enough to represent the fact that this camera has taken a photo of this light source. So when you have a landscape like this, and the most important rule of the landscape, the first rule really is establish your horizon line, and the second rule is where is the light source. If you are painting like this and your value is not bright enough, and I'm just testing the grayscale, it's not going to look right. When you guys take a photo, try to go outside if there's a full moon, take a photo, even if it doesn't have to be a full moon, but full moon so you can get the effect of this critique. But a full moon, your camera will not be, your camera will behave as if it is taking a picture of a flashlight. It will start to distort. You can't just take a picture of a moon because the light is so strong coming out of that moon that it's distorting the way the camera is recording that light source. So there's going to be a lot of little rays or blur, meaning that the light source here will not make sense unless it is bright enough. That's too bright. That's hella bright. I'm just going to throw it into grayscale because I think we should stay away from the colors that you're using. I can only critique everything at once, so I'm going to try to select the moon and dodge, start with midtones. Actually, let's just go straight into highlights. There we go. Now, is that not reading as a moon? Part of the way we read a moon is of course, its brightness and then the distortion on the top and the blemishes. So if you're drawing a landscape where the moon does not have this kind of brightness in the image, it will not read as a moon. The moon is a light source. Light sources exist in high value. That's the rule. Everyone write that back to me. Just gonna do one thing though. I'm gonna get my smudge. I'm gonna get my smudge and I'm going to fix the edges over here. I don't know why some of you are so careful in your grace. When you do grayscale, you're already careful. You're already not using any light sources. So some of you are doing grayscales and you're not really exploring what you're supposed to be exploring when you're in grayscale. This wasn't in grayscale. This was in color, though you should work in grayscale for now. Stay away from color. It'll just slow down your improvement. You're supposed to be exploring form right now, so color is going to get in your way of exploring form, and the most essential factor in the form formula is the light source, what the role the light source plays on the form. And you cannot expect yourself to improve if you're not even understanding the fact that the light is bright. Light is bright. The brightness of the light will determine how bright the landscape is going to be. So when we're talking about this area here, this entire light is going to travel this way. So the way you did it was wrong. When we're talking about light sources, what we have to do is use the light source as a vanishing point so that we can create the proper cast shadow. So this cast shadow is responding this way as if the light source was here. And that would make sense if the moon was right over here. That would make sense as to why the shadow is traveling this way. But the moon is over here. The light is going to travel along the grid lines of the horizon line. It's not going to travel straight, because if we see it as a vanishing point, the moon ends at this point here. The vanishing point from the moon ends at this point here, meaning anywhere past this point, shadows can't exist. The moon has access to this light here. Light travels in straight lines. It is just a bunch of vectors, a bunch of rays that never stop. So the shadow will not exist past this point. It can, however, exist between this area and along the flatness of the horizon line. So if you guys want to create proper cast shadows, you're going to need to think of the moon as not only bright enough to cast the cast shadows, and the cast shadow should be pretty bright in this case, but it should be a vanishing point. something like this. Another rule, the other rule says that the further the object is from the object casting it, the fuzzier the shadow will get. So cast shadows aren't sharp all the time. They will get fuzzier. How come the smudge brush looks so weird? Because I put it on a scatter brush. I found a brush that behaves very similarly to the way I work with smudge traditionally with my finger or the smudge tool. So I want something that has a little bit of scatter to it that can not be such a straight nasty line but also scatter the smudge. Not only does the shadow get fuzzier, but the shadow fades. It does not stay the same sharpness. You don't put it on scatter up here. You have to choose a brush that scatters itself. You have to change the brush of the smudge tool to be a scatter brush. Gesture drawing, please. I'm not going to just go into gesture drawing. I might cover gesture drawing in the near future, but as for today's class, it's too short notice for me to change the theme entirely. Also, I do not do themes unless there is homework done by you guys. I will not just sit here and do a lesson. I need to have you guys do work. You guys have to put in some work in order to get the lesson. So let's make sense of this light source. This light source is really bright, and what it's revealing to us is pretty much everything in the image. So let's start with the focal point, which is the character here. The light is traveling on her hair, on her hat. Let me zoom in. But it's also affecting not just the character, but the landscape around her. So the side of the cube, anywhere else that you see this image. So the side of the cube on this rock structure, the side of this rock structure here, they will all have a little bit of the light source on them. Because now we made the moon brighter, so the moon gives off more light. Okay. Yeah, that Proco video is pretty good for gestures. It's really smart. You guys should watch it. There's that, and then there's the fact that the landscape, the open landscape itself, will become brighter. Just like, whoa, what the hell? What the fuck did I do? Okay. So like this whole area here will become brighter. And now you have kind of a light source that makes sense. Still, you don't want to, here's a couple of rules. You don't want to create a landscape. So land is horizontal. It's flat. It's when we look at the world, we have two eyes beside each other. We don't have two eyes on top of each other. So on our face, it's not eye. It's eye. So when we look at something that is horizontal, we will see a landscape version of that. That's why it's so popular in movies. That's why widescreen is pretty much the best way to present anything. That's why stages are pretty much horizontal. That's just how we see things. We want to see the wide version of things instead of the altitude. So when we're talking about a landscape and a character in the landscape, she is not large enough, nowhere near large enough for it to be a portrait. If it was a portrait and it was just someone sitting down, then it would justify the fact that the canvas has to be vertical. But because it's a landscape, you want to keep horizontal canvases. So something like this would do a lot better. Even something like this would do a lot better and would feel a lot better. So let me just show you what I mean. Okay. It'll have a wider impact. It'll have a bigger impact on the storytelling of the canvas in the canvas. You don't want to give off the wrong message that you're trying to send off. If it's a traveler traveling, okay, what's she traveling on? A land, open land. So how are you supposed to express open land with a vertical canvas? Okay, see that? It feels like you can breathe now. You can actually breathe. That's really one of the most important rules about landscape is the horizon line, and you don't really have a horizon line unless you have a horizon that is visible, and it's a horizon, it's horizontal. It's something that we have to see with both eyes beside each other. Um, so yeah, that crop changed it a lot, and it's just all about presentation. If you guys forget about these rules and just jump in, hey, I'm going to do a landscape today, without researching, you're going to get something that fails the first time you try it. Uh, so please remember to do your research. I have lots of videos on landscapes. I have a video on landscapes already out that pretty much covers all of these rules. Landscape requires midground, background, foreground, unless for some weird freak accident you have like an open desert and then you have only those three structures beside each other. You want to separate the structures a little bit. You have enough light. So what you want to do is mess around with, like some props in the foreground. Think of it as a stage, really. That's what's going to help you. Watch that little mouth of yours. Oh man. And the further you go, the more oh, this is very, very elementary right here. This is not rendered. But the further you go, the brighter the background gets. And there's the fact that the horizon line is separated from the landscape. You guys cannot have a merged color or the same color all around for the sky. You have to create some variation. Also, so this moon is almost ready to set. Am I right? Or is it high in the sky? No, if it was high in the sky, we would not be seeing it in this canvas. So I'm just trying to get all of this. So what happens, because it's low in the sky, what will happen is that horizon line will be brightened. The line itself. Okay, let me just get that. So what happens is a little something like this. We have our soft brush. Usually it's best to use soft brush for this kind of situation. You don't want to mess around with any textured brushes for something that requires that comes from a natural gradient. So this separation, this little line that we created, creates a feeling. It should be on the other side of the sky because the sun is rising, but this also helps. And what you want to do is show that the halo of the moon is causing this light to just hover. And if you do look outside at night, you will see this kind of like gradual tone that travels across the sky from where it is darkest to where it is lightest in the sky because of the moon. You'll see that this happens. And right now what's happened is that it feels like this is a hill, and if you go behind that hill, you'll kind of sink. So if you want to make it feel like there's more in the background, you have to add in some more props, but they have to represent atmospheric fade or distance blur in order for us to really feel like they're in the background. So I'm going to add in like a very, very gentle layer of hills. And you see how everything has just been stretched. The distance has been stretched back. And that also looks really, really good. Basically, you have to be a cinematographer, artist, and storyteller all in one go. Good luck, guys. Yes, that's true. Being an artist you're not limited to one school of thought. Hey, there's something that I'm going to redraw. No, it's not like that. You have to deal with presentation. You have to deal with costume design. You have to deal with expressions and knowledge of basic human emotion. You have to do like on the psychology behind that. You have to deal with composition, basic physics when it comes to drawing and understanding anatomy, drawing and understanding landscapes. And there's a lot that goes into it. Basic physics when it comes to gravity, understanding the anatomy and the gravity tied into it and the way the human body has been structured in gesture lines. There's a lot that goes into being an artist. It's not that easy to get away with not knowing the rules. You don't get away with not knowing the rules. And that's the unfortunate truth. That's why it's so hard to draw, because not only are you fighting the fact that you don't know everything yet, but you're fighting yourself. You're fighting your own habits, and we can be very lazy. Artists can be very, very goddamn lazy. The thing that I used to do is I used to avoid researching altogether. I avoided researching. So from now on until infinity, I'm just going to research forever because my drawings have gotten better because of the fact that I research. And it's not something that I still like to do. I hate it. I think it sucks. It slows down my creative process because we have this ego behind us that wants us to just go in and create. But there is a responsibility that you have to do your research and to figure out how best to recreate this landscape. You can't just throw a vertical canvas for a landscape. If it's a book cover, it's different. In the book cover, you kind of do the landscape. You kind of do this whole thing right here, but then you add space at the bottom and the top for the names of the author and the title. But you still find a way to make it work where you still have the scale to your benefit. And that leads me to my next point about landscapes. Scale. Scale is really important. I talk about it in my videos a lot. This girl seems like she's a giant compared to that moon. So you're having, the main light source, which is amazingly rendered. And then you have the girl here. What's happening? You have the girl here who does not really, she doesn't have all that detail on her. She's not really rendered. So the focal point, there's a minus for that. And she's too large. She's too big. What will happen is that it will take away from the moon as the sort of herald of the canvas, really, the main bringer of the story. Yeah, there's a person standing. I think you should give them a gesture like they're walking instead of just standing, because they look like a cutout. But and if you want her to be detailed, you're gonna have to start detailing, just so that she can be a little bit more intriguing. But I mean, you could throw her up here or just down here again. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're remembering that the focal point needs to be decided on. So this focal point here is now going to be focused. She's small enough to make the landscape seem epic and large. And it makes a little bit more sense to the fact that she's in an open space. Whenever you have humans in a landscape, the only time they're going to be that big is if they're in the direct foreground, like they're right here. Like there's a guy ready to assassinate her right here and he has a gun. Now you've got a storyline, But that's the only time he'll be that large. Before, she was pretty big and it was kind of, again, unresearched. There was very little knowledge behind what was happening here. And if you want to create even more of a statement on, oops, let me erase this guy. If you want to create even more of a statement in the landscape on her position or her being the Lone Ranger or whatever, you can use some effects, staging effects that connect her to the focal point, but not make her the focal point necessarily. She will still be interesting. We will still look at her. Maybe you can make her a little bit darker for the focal point. But it won't be equal detail on both of these characters where the eyes get confused. The moon is pretty much what you want. And if you want to make it more interesting, bring in some clouds, because the sky at this point is the storyteller. The sky is what's really taking this story. So I'm just going to add in some clouds. And I will make them a little darker. Just hate it when clouds are too big. Burn on shadows and highlights all the way. You might want to mess around with that a little as well. You have so much at your disposal, and a reference really is what guides you around what to choose. A reference is what will inspire you. If you're not inspired by the real world, then what are you inspired by? Because that's the only world we get right now. Like, unless we find an alien universe, and then we can start copying their physics, and we can start using that excuse that, oh, I'm using different physics here. I'm using, what's the famous alien race? I'm using Klingon physics. That's not funny. Istebrak, you suck. I don't know. I'm using otherworld physics. But until then, until we get to use that excuse, we cannot do that. We have to use the physics of this world. Okay? So Christopher Nolan doesn't have to do this much work, guys. He employs someone. Next 10 years of research or win that lottery. That's funny. But yeah, please remember that landscapes are horizontal. They need some work on basic knowledge about physics and how, landscapes lay out, how the geography looks in different distances. There's a great deal of info that you could find online about, just try to approach it from a different school of thought. Like, search up how to take photography of a landscape. Don't search up how to draw a landscape because there aren't that many good tutorials out there. What you do is you search up how to photograph a landscape. Indirectly, you will learn how to draw one just by observing the way photographers take on landscapes. When you're a photographer and you want to take a picture of buildings, do you use a horizontal canvas? No, you don't. You use a vertical canvas. You flip your canvas over. And that's because you want to get the full effect of the buildings, and you want to get the long elongated structures, and so that you can show off the lines and the way you guide lines. Especially if you're standing on the ground, you want to show off that height and that largeness compared to you in worm's eye view. That's something that you do in art as well. Guess what? Haha, you use it in art. That's the amazing thing. Is searching through other schools of thought teaches you how to do stuff in your school of thought, in your discipline, which is art. If you want to know how to draw eyes better, this is something I always recommend to my private students. Go online, go to YouTube and search up how to make up eye makeup. How to eye makeup. And indirectly you will learn about, creases of the eye, you'll learn about hooded eyes, you'll learn about the way eyelashes need to spread out. There's makeup for men. You also want to look up makeup for men and how men use makeup, but they don't use it to suggests a larger eye or a deeper shadow, because makeup for men is not trying to do the elf. It's trying to keep the beauty and kind of stick to the ogre that's in the men. If you don't know the difference between elf and ogre and the way I teach it, there's a video that I have available that talks about beauty, and you can look that up. Approaching it from a different school of thought helps you. So look up how to photograph landscapes if you're having trouble figuring out and mapping out and presenting landscape. If you're having trouble with landscape composition, look up how to photograph landscapes. It will really teach you so much. It taught me I learned so much from that. It taught me a lot. What else could you use? Okay, this is something else that I assign my students. I give them YouTube videos of basic wushu stances, so like tiger stance, or I show them ballet videos, how to pirouette, and what happens, and basic ice skating or belly dancing, and I ask them to copy down those gestures. So what happens is, by learning how the person teaches the basic tiger stance or praying mantis or whatever, or how to do the pirouette, you learn which muscles are being used in that action. So what happens is you know which muscles to draw first, or you know which muscles to focus on. That's pulling from different worlds into helping you develop your art knowledge. Your visual library is not limited to just art and art tutorials. You guys can use everything at your disposal. So if you want to learn how to draw gestures, for the person who asked me about gestures, you want a really good piece of advice, that's the advice I would suggest. Don't look at still images to draw your gestures. Look at videos and look at what the person's teaching you about how to pirouette, how to kick, how to roundhouse, I don't know, anything. And look at what they're teaching you about the muscles being used, how to maintain your balance. That's stuff you have to think about. There's a great deal of balance in drawing figures that you have to think about. So please remember, it's not just about art and art tutorials. So the image has changed a lot, but I can't really flatten it. And then, so before, it's good as a book cover, but you'd have to shrink her and you'd have to push everything down and kind of just limit it to there, and then just put some stars at the top and some weeds at the foreground. But if you want a full landscape painting, you're going to have to flatten everything and compress it. Some stuff is in the way of other stuff. You have to stack a little bit. Stacking is another massive thing that I use in painting. There's different stuff. There's different stuff that you can use to make the landscape feel more like it has depth. You can place one object in front of another object. You can place one object in front of another object and then shrink the distant object. You can make this object full detail and shrunken this object very little detail. You can make this object very sharp and this object very blurry, and this all will affect the way the depth in the canvas happens. There's so much stuff that you guys can do, and it's all available online as well. And I have videos of this on my channel, the exact rules that you can use. It's on the How to Paint Landscape video on my channel. I teach those rules of depth there. So let me just flatten this. So this was a bit of a lesson instead of a paint over, because the painting has changed a lot. This is another image that I found, and this one is an over, is like the opposite. This one has done the canvas too much. This one has made too much of a horizontal canvas, and it's like you're looking through like a crack between two major pieces of wood, like in a structure, or like you're in a crate and you're trying to look at it. Like that's all you'll see. It's like we're missing stuff at the top and the bottom. And this missing information has kind of limited you in what you can do with the canvas. So you've got all this cool light that you're messing around with, which is really cool. Good job. You're experimenting a lot. But what you need to do is give yourself enough space that it looks like a realistically visible kind of structure, stuff that we would see if we were standing nearby, and not limit it as if we're hiding everything else behind our hand or something and we're peeking through our hands. You want to give enough space at the top and the bottom, but I'm not saying to detail it, to over detail, but I am saying enough that there should be an amount of light reflected in the water that we can see, that you can showcase. So I'm going to throw a little bit, it would turn a little bit orange or yellow in the water, just like that. Red lights need to be a little saturated. And when you reflect red light, or anything red, or any color actually, you want to put it in degrees. You don't want to just get the red and then smack it on there. It's not going to feel natural. Red changes color the less saturation it has. So it looks orange on the edges, but it'll look red on the insides, and that's what you want to do. It wouldn't really be visible here. I'm forcing it. This would not be visible, but this is a very cartoony looking landscape, so I'm breaking some rules. This would not be visible here. I just want to use these effects at my disposal. Okay, what else? You kind of have the only interesting thing happening in this painting is this light source. So what you want to do is just take it home. You want to bring in as much pointers to it as the focal point than anything else in the painting. So you want to render it. You want to draw every little wrinkle of the bark. You want to make it a little bit brighter and make the background a little bit darker. So I'm just using burn and dodge, which you should be doing this with your paintings. Holy shit. Okay, and I love the way you've created this clash between warm and cool colors. It's really, really nice. So I'm just going to push that. And you seem to have a tree line somewhere in the background. And that's awesome. I don't know why you didn't take advantage of that. Remember that horizon line little thingy that I did? Where the horizon line is a little bright? That's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to make the horizon line a little brighter. Just so that we can see that there is a sky behind there, and it is something that we would see if we were standing in this area. Holy crap. Something like that. Okay, that lasso is just a wreck, a train wreck. Something like this. Very, very gently to give the background some intrigue. You don't want to make it too interesting, because then this is not interesting anymore. And then what's the story behind this whole landscape? What's happening? What is it? What's happening here? If there's a tree, some of the tree will go under the water. So you might want to fade away some of that tree. And kind of make some of it fading away gradually. and it's just going under the water. All of this is the entire stage is the water. And what you want to do is just show that off. And you can use as many little, things as you need. Go crazy with the weeds, go crazy with the grass. That's you have to start creating the environment. And this is what I mean when I say using other schools of thought to help you complete a painting. Go look up swamp life. Look up like a swamp. That's a reference right there. And what happens in the swamp? What are the problems basically? And look, how do you make a swamp garden? Those are popular. You plant like from the water down or some weird stuff that people do. You've got all this plant life that you could be messing around with to bring in more interest into the painting. And I don't see any of that here. It's just pretty empty. And if it's some sort of sacred place, if it's sacred, if it's not supposed to have swamp life, then I don't really know what else to add to it. It would just feel very, very empty. What I recommend is like throwing in some fireflies and bringing in a new color. So you've used green, you've used red. Let's use some blue. Maybe I can just dab it on. So let's just add some like bioluminescence just to continue this. You can add water lilies. There's so much you can add that will all suggest, and I'm just pointing these edges to the focal point, these little bites in the water lilies, because it's like an arrow, it's pointing to the focal point. And for these, I actually might just make them a little warmer. There we go. Throw in an outer glow. Opacity is down. Color is red. Size. There we go. Convert to smart object. Rasterize. And this, I would just make it, very, very not detailed, but it's still a unit of interest, still a point of interest. It's not the focal point. It shouldn't be the focal point at any point. But you're dressing up the landscape according to its ecosystem or whatever, its habitat, its whatever it is. Terrain, I don't know what the scientific word is for different kinds of landscapes. It's terrain or ecosystem, right? Or biome? I'm not sure. And these can be of different color or a different shade. You always want to be pointing up at this right here. So remember, a lot goes into landscapes. You can't just say, hey, today I'm going to do a landscape. There's some some rules that will further the accuracy of your rendition, that will make your painting make sense. Also, from water seems to be glowing on its own from the way you drew it originally. So what happens is with every light comes a glow. So you want to throw some glow upwards. That's going to look really pretty as it clashes with the reds here. And you can be throwing a fog-like movement over everything. And then to separate the background, you can throw another fog type deal in the background. Let me see if I can do this properly. Select inverse. And anything in the background has that purple color, so you want to stick to that purple color. And now we've created like a canopy-like thing. So let me just erase away what I did. So you have like a canopy here, and that looks really pretty. That's what you want to do. And the light is just traveling very gently across a line in the horizon, but it's still not so important, so we close it off in a shadow. It's still not as important as this really, really important focal point here. I still don't know what the story is. I don't know what your story is all about, But let's just compare the before and after. Before, where you had that kind of too large, too long, or too wide landscape. And then after, let me just try to get it on the exact spot. It was. So before, after. Just a little bit more environment, thinking about glows, what's causing the glow, adding more information. This is all a proof of the fact that you're not researching enough. You didn't know what to add here. Even the way you drew the trees, it's a very nice texture you had here. It reminds me of the way they draw in Adventure Time, actually. I love that show. But you also didn't, where are the roots? You know, if water, if a tree's structure or whatever is submerged in a swamp like, you know, like a water or a mud, there's going to be some of the roots are going to be shown off because you're kind of just doing a cross section of all of the roots here. So there was none of that. How about water life? How about fishes? Fishes like to crowd around light sources, so you can use something cool like that where you draw a bunch of fish that are all glowing because of the light source, and the glow is coming from the fish. And you have like a million little fish just all crowding around this place. And then you can throw in the travelers that are coming towards it, because you always want to be telling a story. You don't want to let that chance go where you're not telling the story. Point us to what's happening. This seems to be like a passage or some sort of threshold or some sort of magical place where the witch said, I'll meet you here if you want to save your brother or something. And you want to just draw the little kid just kind of really scared, and the little sister or something, and they're all just waiting. I don't know, for something. For the witch to come by. Something like that. That's how you finish you need a narrative, and the narrative needs to be supported by a realism, and the realism needs research. A lot of research goes into drawing anything. You're drawing a whole world, so don't think that you're going to get off scot-free just by throwing in a couple of things and saying, hey, why don't I draw good? Why don't I draw good? It's because you're not thinking good. It's because you're not thinking of what's needed from you, what your responsibilities are. So it's not a big change, but this one gives me more. This one's feeding my eyes more. So today's lesson really, I don't have time for this one, but today's lesson was solely about realizing that you don't know everything, and it's okay. And there's this terrible stigma about reference use with you guys. You guys think that it's bad to use references. It's never too early to use references. You guys have to start using references ASAP. It will change the way you draw. The more references that you use, the more you expose yourself to real information about textures and material, and the form and material. So the more you look at realistic rocks, the more you'll remember, hey, rocks actually behave like this. They have a bit more of a jagged edge to them. You can see the traces of the cube in there. Trees have more of a windy, tangled string kind of look. That's kind of what I see. I see, like, I compare them together in my head. I compare it to another material. The more reference that you use, the more you're feeding your mind. The less empty your canvases will be. Your canvases, the canvases that we looked at today, were empty. They were empty drawings. They had nothing in them. And then after the critique, I tried to add some stuff in and point to some rules, but you yourself have to find a way to fill your landscapes. If you guys aren't looking up references, you'll have nothing to fill it with. It'll be filled with gradients and light glows. And the gradients and light glows do not fill a canvas. They just make it look like you're too scared to render. And that's what we had today. We had gradients and light glows, and that's not enough. That's not enough to render with. Does anyone have anything to ask or add to this lesson today? Does anyone suffer from this problem where they don't know what to fill their landscapes with? They don't know what to landscape? I mean, the artwork should make sense in its own visually if the entire backstory isn't there. If you take it from a realistic perspective, yeah, it should make sense. Like the tree should make sense with the soil that it's sprouting from. It shouldn't be sprouting from like perfectly. There should be some root systems. If the light source is traveling beautifully across the forms of the trees and the ground and the water, if the bioluminescence that you've added to it is also being drawn properly, yeah, you don't need a narrative. But a narrative helps you decide how to fill your canvas. If you're saying I'm going to meet the witch of Forest End, at midnight, that's going to help you fill in. Okay, Forest End, we're talking trees, we're talking willows, we're talking all kinds of creepy shit. We're talking about a witch. Witches don't frequent H&M stores. They frequent deep, dark woods where they go to practice their love of Satan. So that's where you go. I mean, not all witches. Some witches are good. That's where you go in your mind to know what to draw. Okay, so I'm going to add in a moon glow. I'm going to add in a very dim secondary light source from a nearby stream and a little lamp. I'm going to create mystery. I'm going to add in fog. I'm sure she has some sort of asthma, so she needs really humid air because she's a crazy bitch that's been smoking since she was 5. The witch, I mean. All of that stuff helps you fill fill your canvas. That's why a narrative is so important. But that's one way to fill your canvas. If you're like a geology student, then you'll know how to fill your canvas, I'm sure. You'll know about glacier structures and glacier systems on the sides of mountains. You'll know about dry grass at the base of glacier systems. You'll know about snow and the color of the snow. You'll know about the humidity level in those kinds of atmospheres where we find glaciers. So you'll know how to fill it therein. But if you combine both, you combine narrative and then a narrative, and you combine knowledge from your reference, you'll get a lot. You'll get something that looks amazing, and that's what separates you between. That's what keeps you between you and the professional version of you. Professional is a very vague word, but it basically means the good painter version of you, the one that's really advanced, that's like a year or 3 from now. H&M. Did I say S&M? No, I didn't. I said H&M. They don't all have warts. But I don't know. Maybe some are nice. Granny Weather Wax don't have warts. Patriarchy. Feminism. So I do need to research it. I've been doing characters a lot. I've never really tried landscape yet. Stick to characters for now. Do your gray background character design kind of thing. Stick to that. And when you're ready, you have to be aware, Sarah, that when you're ready to take on landscape, say, hey, I'm ready for landscape. Don't just get on your Photoshop, open a landscape canvas, and just start drawing a landscape. No, there's a big step that you skip, and that's research. Get a folder called inspiration folder and fill it with the kinds of landscapes you want to draw. People's art, or maybe realistic photographs of realistic landscapes. And fill your visual library from that. Work from that inspiration folder. That's how you can start safely. Don't just jump in and draw something because it's going to be filled with mistakes because you haven't yet explored, unless you already know a little bit and you know where you want to start, and then you're going to dress it up with references later. But that's what I do. At the end of the day, this is all my opinion. That's what I did to sort of break the problem that I had with my landscapes. Is I did research. After I realized I don't know how to fill these landscapes up, I did my research, and I found really, really awesome way to work from. Remember, officially announced, next week is going to be texture studies. You want to study rocks, you want to study water, just study it. It's like a material study, and send it in for homework for Tuesday and Thursday next week. Texture studies, spread the word. I'm going to make an announcement, but spread the word, all right? And that's it. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.